What if I told you that no one has ever truly made you angry? Not your parents, not your partner, not your enemies, and that the source of your irritation has been living quietly inside you all along. Stay with me, because by the end of this talk, you will understand why anger is not something done to you, but something awakened within you, and how mastering this truth can make you psychologically untouchable. You believe it begins when someone insults you, ignores you, disrespects you. But the insult is only a spark. The real explosion comes from something far older, something hidden in the depths of your psyche. Anger is never about the present moment. It is the echo of unresolved conflicts, unexamined expectations, and the fragile image you carry of yourself. If you do not understand this, you will spend your life fighting shadows, blaming the world, resenting people, and exhausting yourself in emotional battles that cannot be won. There is a silent war happening inside you, and most of your life you have mistaken the battlefield. You believe the conflict begins when someone raises their voice, dismisses your effort, overlooks your presence, or questions your worth. You believe anger is a reaction to injustice, to stupidity, to disrespect. Yet what if the disturbance does not originate in the moment of offense, but in a far older fracture within you? What if the insult is merely a key, and the lock it opens has been waiting for years? The most dangerous illusion you carry is the belief that others control your emotional climate. You say, "He made me furious," or "She ruined my day," as though your inner state were a puppet tied to external strings. But no one can enter your psyche without permission. Something in you responds because something in you was already prepared to respond. The world touches only what is sensitive. If there were no wound, there would be no pain. Consider how differently two people react to the same criticism. One laughs and shrugs. The other burns with humiliation for days. The words were identical. The tone was the same. Yet the internal landscape was different. Anger is not a product of the event, but of the structure of the self that receives it. This is why you must look inward rather than outward if you wish to be free. Within you lives an image, a carefully constructed identity. It says, "I am competent, I am intelligent, I am deserving of respect." This image is not inherently false. It is necessary for social survival. But it is fragile. And when someone challenges it, even subtly, you feel an existential tremor. The ego does not experience contradiction as information, it experiences it as threat. So when someone interrupts you, corrects you, ignores you, what is truly happening? The outer event is small, almost trivial. Yet inside, a narrative ignites. They do not value me. I am being diminished. I must defend myself. Anger rises not to protect truth, but to protect the image. You see, anger often disguises fear, fear of insignificance, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as inadequate. These fears are ancient. They were formed in childhood, in moments when approval equaled safety and disapproval equaled danger. The body remembers what the conscious mind has forgotten. And so a minor disagreement today can awaken the emotional intensity of a long-forgotten humiliation. If you truly desire to never be bothered by anyone, you must be courageous enough to observe this mechanism without self-deception. Most people justify their anger by pointing outward. They catalogue the faults of others with precision. But very few ask, why did this touch me so deeply? What belief was threatened? What expectation collapsed? This inquiry is uncomfortable because it dismantles the illusion of moral superiority. It forces you to admit that your suffering is not caused solely by the external world, but by your internal attachments. You are attached to being understood, attached to being admired, attached to being treated fairly according to your definition of fairness. When reality diverges from this script, frustration arises. The paradox is this: the more rigid your expectations, the more fragile your peace. You expect people to behave rationally, kindly, predictably, yet human beings are complex, contradictory, and often unconscious of their own motives. To demand consistency from them is to demand the impossible, and when the impossible fails to occur, you interpret it as a personal offense. Your anger says, "This should not be happening," but life does not operate according to your internal blueprint. The world is not obligated to confirm your standards. When you cling to the belief that it must, you place your tranquility in the hands of strangers. Freedom begins when you accept that events are neutral. A comment is simply a vibration in the air. A glance is merely a movement of eyes. Meaning is assigned by you. Interpretation is your creation, and what you create you can also revise. Imagine pausing in the exact moment irritation arises. Instead of reacting, you observe. You feel the heat in your chest, the tightening in your jaw. You do not suppress it, you study it. You ask, what story am I telling myself right now? Perhaps the story is, they think I am incompetent, or I am being disrespected. But is this fact or assumption? Often anger is born, not from what was said, but from what you believe was implied. The mind fills in gaps with its own fears. You interpret ambiguity as hostility because you are primed to defend yourself. Yet when you separate observable reality from imagined narrative, the emotional charge weakens. This is the Stoic insight. It is not things themselves that disturb you, but your judgments about them. You cannot control the thoughts, moods, or immaturity of others. You cannot dictate how they perceive you, but you can examine your judgments with ruthless honesty. Ask yourself, must I be universally approved to be secure? Must every interaction affirm my worth? If someone misjudges me, does my essence truly change? When you see that your identity is not dependent on external validation, anger loses its foundation. To be unbothered does not mean to be passive or indifferent. It means you no longer react automatically to protect a fragile self-image. You respond, if necessary, from clarity rather than from wounded pride. There is immense strength in this restraint. It is not weakness, it is mastery. When you stop demanding that others confirm your internal narrative, you reclaim your authority. You realize that your peace is not a negotiation with the world, but a discipline of the mind. And as this realization deepens, the silent war inside you begins to quiet. The battlefield shifts from outer confrontation to inner understanding. The enemy is no longer the person in front of you, but the unconscious pattern within you that seeks constant defense. Observe your anger carefully, as though you were studying a phenomenon in nature rather than a personal possession. Do not rush to justify it. Do not hurry to suppress it. Simply watch it. The moment you step back and become the observer, something subtle shifts. You are no longer identical with the emotion. You are witnessing it, and in that witnessing, a space opens. Within that space, you begin to notice something unsettling. The intensity of your reaction rarely matches the magnitude of the event. A brief comment unsettles you for hours. A stranger's tone lingers in your mind long after the conversation ends. Why should such small occurrences possess such power? If the cause were purely external, the disturbance would fade as quickly as the sound itself. But it does not. It reverberates. This reverberation reveals that the event did not create the anger. It activated something already present. Like striking a hidden bruise, the pain exposes an injury you may not have known was there. The outer world becomes a mirror reflecting inner fractures, and yet most people curse the mirror rather than examining the wound. You might say anyone would react this way, but this is rarely true. Others may remain calm in circumstances that agitate you deeply. The difference lies not in the event, but in the internal structure that interprets it. Your history, your insecurities, your unfulfilled desires, all form a lens through which reality is filtered. When reality passes through that lens, it is colored by your past. Perhaps you were once dismissed when you needed affirmation. Perhaps your efforts were overlooked when you longed to be seen. Those experiences may have faded from conscious memory, yet they remain active beneath the surface. When someone interrupts you today, the mind does not merely process the interruption, it resurrects the old narrative of being unheard. The present moment fuses with the past, and the emotional weight multiplies. This is why awareness is revolutionary. When anger rises, instead of declaring, "They are wrong," you pause and ask, "What exactly is being triggered in me?" The question itself begins to dissolve the illusion that the cause is purely external. It turns your attention inward, where the true mechanism resides. The discipline here is subtle. You must resist the temptation to defend your emotion as righteous. The ego enjoys moral certainty. It says, "My anger is justified," and sometimes, on the surface, it may appear so, but justification does not equate to freedom. You can be correct and still be enslaved by your reaction. As you observe more closely, you will notice patterns. Certain types of people disturb you more than others. Certain tones, certain attitudes, certain forms of criticism pierce deeper. These patterns are not random. They point toward unresolved tensions within your own psyche. The person who irritates you most intensely often embodies qualities you have not reconciled within yourself, either traits you secretly possess and deny, or traits you lack and envy. When you realize this, anger transforms from an enemy into a messenger. It signals that something unconscious seeks recognition. Instead of projecting hostility outward, you reclaim the projection. You acknowledge that the disturbance originates in your internal landscape. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim power. Power does not mean domination over others. It means sovereignty over your response. The external world will remain unpredictable. People will continue to act from their own fears, biases, and blind spots. If your peace depends on their maturity, you will remain perpetually unstable. But if your peace depends on your awareness, you begin to stand on solid ground. Now comes the more difficult revelation. Beneath most anger lies an illusion about how life should behave. You expect fairness. You expect reciprocity. You expect that your intentions will be understood. These expectations are rarely spoken aloud, yet they form a silent contract with reality. And when reality violates this contract, you feel betrayed. But who signed this agreement? Who guaranteed that others would see you accurately, treat you consistently, or act rationally? The world did not make these promises. They were constructed internally as a way to create a sense of control. The ego prefers predictability because unpredictability threatens its stability. When someone behaves unfairly, it is not merely the act that angers you. It is the collapse of your belief that fairness governs human interaction. When someone misjudges you, it is not only the misjudgment that hurts. It is the shattering of the expectation that you will be seen as you see yourself. This is the death of illusion. It is uncomfortable because illusions provide psychological comfort. They tell you that if you behave well, you will always be rewarded. If you are kind, you will always be treated kindly. When reality contradicts this narrative, anger arises to defend the fantasy. To move beyond anger, you must relinquish the demand that life conform to your internal script. This does not mean you approve of injustice or abandon discernment. It means you accept that human beings are fallible, inconsistent, and often unconscious. Their behavior reflects their inner world, not your worth. When you internalize this truth, something remarkable occurs. Insults lose their sting. If the criticism is accurate, it becomes useful information. If it is inaccurate, it becomes noise. In neither case does it define you. Your identity no longer hangs precariously on the opinions of others. This does not happen through intellectual agreement alone. It requires repeated confrontation with your own reactions. Each moment of irritation becomes an opportunity to dismantle a hidden expectation. Each surge of anger reveals an attachment. Gradually, as these attachments loosen, the emotional charge weakens. You begin to see that your need to be validated, understood, or admired was a subtle form of dependence. And dependence breeds vulnerability. When you withdraw that dependence, you are not isolating yourself. You are stabilizing yourself. You no longer require the world to reassure you of your value. In this state, even deliberate provocation loses effectiveness. The person attempting to disturb you finds no entry point because there is no fragile image to defend. Without the need to prove, to correct, to retaliate, you stand in quiet strength. The collapse of illusion is not dramatic. It is gradual, almost imperceptible. One day you notice that something which once infuriated you now barely registers. The same words are spoken, yet they pass through you without ignition. The external stimulus remains unchanged. The internal structure has transformed. Anger dissolves not because the world has become gentler, but because you have ceased demanding that it be gentle. The ego's insistence on control fades. What remains is clarity. And from clarity emerges a steadiness that no insult can easily disturb. A steadiness born from the recognition that the true source of your turmoil was never outside you, but within the unexamined expectations you carried silently for years. When you no longer react impulsively, something extraordinary begins to take shape within you. The world does not change in its behavior, but it changes in its impact upon you. Insults become information rather than injury. Criticism becomes reflection rather than humiliation. Betrayal becomes clarity rather than devastation. What once felt like a personal assault now reveals itself as a disclosure of another person's character. This transformation is subtle but profound. Before, when someone disrespected you, your mind immediately personalized the act. You interpreted it as a measure of your value. But when you withdraw your identity from their behavior, a new perception emerges. You begin to see that people act from their own limitations, their own fears, their own unresolved conflicts. Their behavior is an expression of their inner state, not a verdict on your worth. A harsh word often reflects inner turmoil. A dismissive gesture often hides insecurity. Arrogance frequently masks fragility. When you understand this, anger gives way to insight. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of retaliating, you assess. You recognize that many people move through life unconsciously, driven by patterns they have never examined. To be enraged by them is to demand awareness from those who do not yet possess it. This does not make you superior, it makes you stable. There is a difference. Superiority still depends on comparison. Stability depends on self-knowledge. When you know your strengths and accept your weaknesses, you no longer require constant external confirmation. The opinions of others lose their capacity to shake you because they no longer determine your internal structure. Imagine someone accusing you unfairly. In the past, you might have felt an immediate surge of indignation. Your pulse quickens, your voice sharpens, your thoughts race in defense. But now you pause, you examine the accusation. Is there truth in it? If there is, then it is a mirror offering correction. If there is not, then it is a projection revealing more about the speaker than about you. In either case, emotional chaos becomes unnecessary. This state is often mistaken for coldness. It is not coldness. It is clarity. You still perceive injustice. You still recognize disrespect, but you are no longer compelled to respond from wounded pride. Your actions, if you choose to take them, arise from deliberate judgment rather than emotional impulse. There is immense freedom in this. You conserve energy that was once wasted on internal storms. You sleep without replaying arguments in your mind. You speak without the urgency of proving yourself. You listen without the constant anticipation of offense. Your presence becomes calmer, heavier, more grounded. People may even sense this shift. Those who once sought to provoke you may lose interest because provocation requires reaction to survive. When reaction disappears, manipulation loses power. You become difficult to disturb not because you have armored yourself emotionally, but because there is less inside you that feels threatened. Compassion naturally begins to replace irritation. When someone behaves rudely, you wonder what burden they carry. When someone attempts to belittle you, you perceive the insecurity beneath their posture. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it contextualizes it. understanding dissolve personal resentment. Yet this psychological freedom is not accidental, it is cultivated through discipline. To never be bothered by anyone requires daily practice. The first step is the pause. Between stimulus and response lies a narrow space, and within that space exists your power. Most people allow this space to vanish instantly. They react before they are aware. To reclaim it, you must slow down your internal process. When irritation arises, breathe. Feel the sensation in your body. Name it without judgment. This is anger. This is defensiveness. By naming it, you separate yourself from it. You are not the anger. You are the observer of anger. This distinction weakens its grip. The second practice is questioning the story. Ask yourself what belief is being threatened. Perhaps you believe you must always appear competent. Perhaps you believe you must never be misunderstood. Identify the assumption. Once exposed, it often reveals its fragility. Why must you appear flawless? Why must everyone understand you perfectly? These demands are unrealistic burdens placed upon both yourself and others. Third, distinguish fact from interpretation. The fact may be simple. A colleague disagreed with you. The interpretation may be elaborate. They are undermining you, disrespecting you, attempting to diminish you. Separate what actually occurred from what your mind constructed. Often the interpretation carries far more emotional weight than the event itself. Fourth, accept what you cannot control. You cannot control another person's perception, mood, or maturity. You cannot force them to see your intentions clearly. When you attempt to control what lies outside your authority, frustration is inevitable. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means recognition of limits. You focus your energy where it is effective, on your own response. Fifth, strengthen the inner self. Many reactions stem from insecurity. If criticism devastates you, perhaps your confidence is built on unstable foundations. Work privately on your weaknesses. Develop competence. Clarify your values. The stronger your internal structure, the less external tremors will disturb it. Finally, practice voluntary humility. Allow yourself to be misunderstood without rushing to correct every perception. Allow yourself to lose minor arguments. Allow silence where you once would have insisted on the last word. Observe that your identity survives. The ego fears disappearance, yet it remains intact, even when not constantly defended. Through repeated practice, these habits reshape your temperament. Situations that once ignited anger now pass through you with reduced intensity. The emotional reflex weakens because the underlying attachments weaken. You no longer interpret every disagreement as a threat, every criticism as humiliation, every slight as catastrophe. The ultimate realization is that peace is an internal discipline, not an external achievement. It does not depend on the cooperation of others. It arises from your capacity to govern yourself. When you govern your interpretations, your expectations, and your reactions, the behavior of others loses its authority over your inner climate. In this state, you move through the world with a composed strength. You engage when necessary. You withdraw when appropriate. You speak when useful. You remain silent when speech would be driven by ego. The world continues in its unpredictability, but you remain centered within yourself, guided not by impulse but by deliberate awareness, grounded in a stability that no passing remark can easily unsettle.